And so actually, I'm guessing when your great grandfather died, I mean, they really thought it was Alzheimer's. Well, I can tell you that you do not have the so-called Alzheimer's gene,
Oh,
but your dad's mom had a heart attack at 64 years old. So that's something that should be of concern both to your mom and yourself. Yeah, I would wonder, and this gets into the podcast level type stuff. You have to remember that dying of a heart attack at 64, by the way, my mother died at 64 of a heart attack.
mm.
That should get your attention. Have enough good things that I'm able to pull off here that's going to change how you live and the quality of your life for decades to come.
Welcome to the Precision Medicine Made Simple podcast, where we simplify the complex world of precision medicine. We're here to explore how personalized healthcare can empower you to understand and improve your health to live a longer and healthier life. Join us as we break down the latest in medical science into actionable insights. Let's make precision medicine accessible and actionable for everyone. Enjoy the show. Today's episode is sponsored by Biography Health, where healthcare meets personalization. With their DNAbled Blueprint, Biography Health empowers you with a health plan based on your unique DNA, aiming to prevent disease and extend your life. Take control of your health journey with a plan as unique as you. Visit biographyhealth.com and start your personalized healthcare journey today. As a reminder, this episode is for educational purposes only. This episode is in no way a replacement for professional health advice. Please consult with your professional primary care provider for medical advice. If at any point you feel that a topic discussed on our podcast was misrepresented, or if you have additional insights that could enhance our discussions, we wholeheartedly encourage you to reach out to us. Your feedback is invaluable in helping us improve and in ensuring our content remains both informative and reflective of the latest developments in precision medicine. Today marks the beginning of an ongoing series where I'm pulling back the curtain on my personal journey through the DNAbled Blueprint process. You'll get an exclusive firsthand look at my own intake form revealing insights from my personal and family health history, one of my genetic reports where Dr. Stanford examines my polygenic risk scores, discussing my genetic predisposition to certain health conditions, and then my personalized DNAbled Blueprint consultation, where you can experience the moment I receive my tailored health recommendations and action plan. This intimate look at my health journey aims to demystify the process and inspire you to take charge of your own well-being. Dr. Stanford has equipped me with specific action items, so we will be recording numerous episodes discussing my results and the strategies I'm implementing. Join me as we explore the ongoing impact of precision medicine in real time. Hey, Dr. Stanford.
Welcome to Precision Medicine Made Simple.
Thank you. Thank you. Happy to be here.
So today, you know what today is?
I am very excited for this day. I've been looking forward to this day for quite some time.
So today's the day where we go over your Get DNAbled report. As you might recall, about 6 weeks ago, we invited you to the Biography Health app, and you filled out an extensive questionnaire, and you contributed a saliva sample, which we send out for whole genome sequencing, and we've run through some platforms. And we also got your medical records from Kaiser. Not a lot of medical records, it turns out, on 29-year-old dudes, because I don't know. First time I went to the doctor, actually, literally, the first time I went to an adult doctor is when I went into Marine Corps. So my first encounter with a doctor was in one of those rooms where you go station to station to station. And they check your vision at one station, they listen to your heart at another, and they take a chest x-ray at another. And I think probably the next time I went to a doctor after that was when I started medical school, like literally. So my point to that is don't feel bad that you haven't been overexposed to the medical profession at age 29. It's pretty typical. I'm going to switch to a share screen mode, and I'm going to take you through this process. You ready?
I am ready. Kind of nervous, to be quite honest.
You shouldn't be. So we invited you to the Biography Health platform, which was a pretty simple thing. This process is a lot quicker and simpler for a younger person than for someone that's 40 or 50 that has had some things happen, because one of the things we're really looking at is your past medical history, and that will help augment in your family history. Those things help augment um, the analysis. So you filled this out, and of course, as part of I'm going to take you a little bit through the process for me.
Okay.
That I'm going to take you through the process that I go through when I look at it. So I noticed you have some back pain, and you put a little explanation here. So your knee tendonitis, where's it hurt on your knee?
Yeah, so it hurts like I feel like where the band is for that connects. I don't know the actual patellar tendon. It's the patellar tendon.
The patellar tendon. So it's probably patellar tendonitis. And just so you know, that's usually an overuse syndrome. Those things that you do, like usually an elliptical, you're a runner, bike, what do you do?
Basketball, a lot of basketball and dance.
Hmm.
So, and volleyball. I feel like it started to happen more when I was in college, just after constant running and jumping on just that
So
hard.
what I've noticed with patients with patellar tendonitis, a lot of times it has to do with like stair climbing, or climbing up steep hills, and they do that repetitively. And there's something about that, that a lot of flexion of the knee over and over and over again causes. And
Causes
then,
the tendonitis. And I
yeah, it
have
causes the tendonitis. So get you a little vitamin N, naproxen here or there. And
yeah.
then we'll also, as we're going through here, and for most of my patients, I'm looking at um, the clues from a genetic standpoint as to anything that we might be able to do, or clues to things like a lot of inflammation in your body, and making sure that we're dealing with that. And the usual random question. So when you were born, do you know if you were breastfed, or any
Mm.
problems on your mom's part during the pregnancy?
No, not that I know of. I don't think I was. I mean, I do think I was breastfed, but there was no
So
problems from there.
probably you went home from the hospital, no complications.
Yeah, no complications.
Have you ever been in the hospital for anything?
I mean, aside from, let's see, that's a good question. I mean, I've been to the emergency room for concussion, and I also have, let's see, like I twisted my ankle pretty bad, sprained it, had a high ankle sprain. A lot of it has just had to do with injuries. And
Yeah.
then I did have an allergic reaction at one point. It was the summer of 2013. And the reason
Yeah.
why I know
Yeah.
this is because it was spring break, and I ended up, I believe, getting pneumonia, and they gave me penicillin, and turns out I got hives from
Oh,
penicillin.
oh,
Penicillin.
oh, 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 oh. So in 2013, you had pneumonia. What do they think that was all about? Most 18-year-olds don't get pneumonia.
To be honest, I'm not too sure. I honestly, I felt like I was overworked in high school. I was just, I honestly don't
Did
really
they
know.
think so? They thought it was a bacterial pneumonia.
Yeah,
So they hospitalized you for that?
I guess it wasn't hospitalized, but it was right after I got the hives, and then I had to go back in and then get seen and checked, and then they gave me something else. Maybe I'm not
So you,
interpreting
well, when we say
hospitalized.
hospitalized, we usually mean stayed overnight.
Oh, bedside. Oh, whoa, whoa, whoa. Just kidding. Wow. All right. Never mind. Well, have I been hospitalized? No, no, no. I guess I haven't.
Okay. And your hair color at age 18 was black brown.
Yeah, I did
The
have the
reason we
frosted
asked that
tips.
is um, pretty random question, but if you happen to be 40 years old, we would have done another kind of analysis that would predict your risk of melanoma. And believe it or not, your hair color at age 18 can, is one of the considerations in that risk. A couple other rando things that we ask is for that is how many moles you have, and have you ever used a tanning bed, and that kind of thing. So what you know about your mom's health during pregnancy, she was completely fine, which
Yeah, she
is
was fine.
okay. Any surgeries?
No surgeries. No surgeries.
This
Actually,
is the
maybe
normal. Go ahead.
I did have one when I was younger, and I believe my tear ducts were clogged. And so when I couldn't cry and have tears,
Yeah.
and so I had
Was
to
it
get some.
because of a traumatic injury or something else?
I don't recall. I was too young, and I don't think it was from a traumatic injury. I think it was just my tear ducts were just clogged, and that was it. But now I can say I can cry all I want now and have tears of
That's so nice to cry at movies.
I depends on the movie, but I try
If you
not
do,
to.
I get because I when I check your labs, I'll check your estrogen levels and see what's going on.
Okay.
Uh, so the tear ducts required clearing, we'll call it. So they basically roto-rooted your tear ducts. So you had the usual childhood stuff and COVID and flu and your P pneumonia there. And so we think it was bacterial, but
Yeah, I
as
think it
far
was
as we know.
bacterial. Mhm.
And where you took antibiotics for a couple of weeks.
Yeah, I did.
And what antibiotics did they wind up putting you on, like azithromycin
So I believe I'm
or
allergic
Levaquin?
to I'm allergic to azithromycin, and then I think they tried penicillin afterwards,
Yeah.
and then I was allergic to that one, and so then they gave me something else that I'm not really sure what it was.
Yeah, well, that's interesting. So, that's going to be good to get clarification on all that once you get into the routine of seeing a doctor, because if you're allergic to, like a lot of antibiotics, sometimes it's a good idea to do desensitization. So if you ever do have a need for antibiotics in the future, they can give them to you. So something to talk to your doctor about. Make sure when you go to the doctor that you say, yeah, I'm allergic to this, allergic to that, and describe it as hives and or problems breathing, etc. Oh, here's that question about tanning beds. You've never used a tanning bed, right?
No, I've never used a tanning bed. And just for
5'11", 215 pounds of solid steel. 110 where blood pressure's good, no medications for my man, no supplements.
I mean, whey protein? Is that
That
considered?
counts.
Okay, yeah, then whey protein.
Let's put that in.
Whey protein is probably the most consistent supplement that I have. I mean, as of recent, my girlfriend is wanting me to take ashwagandha
Uh-huh.
and uh, rare, maybe on not consistently, but there could be some like apple cider vinegar gummies.
Well,
Let's
don't do
see.
the gummies, but the apple cider vinegar is a good one.
Okay, and then we've taken some fish oil pills as well and some turmeric pills too,
So you take but whey protein is the only one you take regularly.
consistently. Yep,
And what do you take it for?
building muscle. At
Okay.
least the hope in building muscle in trying to have this rock hard steel body.
Superman.
Yeah, Filipino Superman.
Okay. Now I said azithromycin, and you're saying penicillin and amoxicillin.
Oh, yes. Excuse me. I mixed it up. Amoxicillin.
You're sure it was amoxicillin?
Yeah, I thought I'm almost positive it's amoxicillin. Azithromycin sounded similar. Actually, well, azithromycin almost sounded like the replace the one that I took after penicillin. Okay, I probably should get
Well, here's
clarification.
the thing. If you were allergic to penicillin, it's unlikely that they started you on amoxicillin because amoxicillin is in the same. Usually, we don't prescribe that to people we know to be allergic to penicillin.
Oh, so
So,
maybe it
it
was
might
this.
be worth trying to obtain those records. I didn't see anything like that in the records I reviewed for you.
Hmm, I'll take a look.
And 29, not retired. Well, gosh, you're not keeping up with your peers. I thought I thought you Gen Zers were just kind of cashing out right and left.
Whoa, 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 whoa. I'm on
No,
the
no,
cusp of millennial right now, not Gen Z, sir.
you're a millennial?
I'm considered a millennial.
Oh, well then, yeah, then go ahead and work 10 hours a day. No. And you 10 hours a day, 5 days a week, stress 4 out of 5. You haven't got that Bentley yet. And so I notice you're standing right now, right?
Hmm.
Yeah, so that's good. Oddly enough, they found that people people that sit as opposed to stand for their work, even that little bit of light standing and walking around can be very helpful for a lot of different conditions, but one that's going to be important for you given your family history. I don't want to jump any guns here, but that'll actually help manage your blood sugars if you're standing and walking around rather than sitting, believe it or not.
Hmm.
And of course, you're a exercise hacker. Are you any good at basketball? What's going on there?
I'm pretty solid, I would say. Like, I don't want to say like I'm really, really good, but I will say that I was the mascot in college.
Oh, yeah. Well, tell me about that. So
Okay.
you were what?
I was the mascot in college, so that was the closest I can get to making the basketball team in college. But I
What?
did play in
At
high school.
LMU, you were like the lion.
I was the lion at LMU.
That's pretty strong, my friend.
Thank you. But
Did you
yeah,
do the little mini tramp where you like, slam dunked and stuff?
I didn't do the mini trampoline. It was a little bit difficult moving around with how big of a head it was. And so I was just doing other dance moves. So a lot of just like popping and more basic breaking. So it was, yeah, the big head was a little bit of a challenge.
Nice. You a caffeine consumer?
Yes, and I feel like it's getting a little bit more frequent now.
1 to 2, 2 to 4.
Right now it's like 2 to 4.
Yeah. I recommend trying to not let it get past the 2 and try to avoid it, after 12 or 1 in the afternoon. And 4 to 6 hours of sleep. What limits your sleep?
Ooh, that's a good question. The
You wake up at 5 and you're just too stressed to fall back to sleep, or what? How's that work?
No, I think it's I started to get used to lack of sleep. I want to say around it was kind of high school and kind of college, but I would say it really started to get solidified in right after college when I was 22 and I had my first job in construction. We were working like 12 to 14 hours a day, and I was really obsessed with this whole idea of hustle culture.
Yeah.
And I was like, you know what? I got to wake up at 5 regardless of whatever time that I sleep. And my boss liked waking up at 4:30, and so there were just times where I was just up, and I think I just now I end up just sleeping a little bit later. I don't really have a good excuse, but I do work a lot, and I think that's just what gives me that lack of sleep. But I do know that when I do sleep and when I want to sleep, I knock out very quickly. One thing that my girlfriend did notice though when I do sleep is that I do snore quite a bit.
Yeah. So your sleep situation was one of the more interesting things, and I'll talk more about it when we actually transition to looking at your blueprint.
Hmm.
But there's a few people that can do okay with 4 to 6 hours sleep. Fairly rare. Some hypomanic people. Do you know what I mean by hypomanic? That's where um, you're just this side of being pathologically active. So, for example, that when I think of hypomanic, you're too young for this, but before you were born, almost there was President Bill Clinton, and so he was someone that wanted to be involved with every single thing about. I mean, he wanted to know what was in every bill that he signed. He would actually read this stuff. You know what I mean? He was a little bit of a control freak, but he was amazing, I guess, for if you listen to the people that worked around him. Apparently, he had an incredible capacity for work and other things. More interestingly, but he used to sleep like apparently like 3 or 4 hours a night, and he would be highly functioning. Now, am I going to put you in the Bill Clinton hypomanic? No, because it's taken a lot of fuel to keep you going throughout the day. So you get this, so you're overcoming probably a shortage of sleep with caffeine. So, so I would look, and by the way, what time of day do you work out?
I try and do it in the mornings.
Okay, good.
So like 5:30, 6 o'clock.
And you occasionally nap?
Occasionally nap.
Yeah, so what you're going to want to shift to is this more toward 8 hours of sleep or 8 hours plus. And we're going to be able to accomplish that by, I think, and I'll tell you how we're going to do that. And moving away from the caffeine, because, certainly more than 2 cups of coffee. And how late do you drink coffee in the day?
It varies just based on the workload that I would have. And so, like, let's say that if I were to be recording something like this, or if I have to make sure I'm very attentive for another podcast, or I'm doing some video, I want to make sure that I'm clear and concise. And so there could be times where I take it at like 3 or 4 if I'm recording later on. But I really try to
you'll have coffee at 3 or 4. Yeah, so that stuff's working against you, and this is the reason why I focus on it, is because getting your sleep right is so important. It's just such a huge thing. And I mean, when I've said this on previous podcasts, I grew up in an era where real men didn't sleep that much and they got up early and you just grind through it, et cetera, mostly in terms of medical training and other stuff. But what we know now is that if there's like 2 or 3 things you want to get right, diet and exercise, of course, but sleep might even be more important than I mean, they're all tied for first place. So it's not just diet and exercise, but you got to get your sleep right. And so this is going to be an opportunity for us because you're self-rating your sleep as fair. You're requiring naps. You're requiring 4 cups of coffee a day sometimes, and out into the afternoon. That's great.
Question. Does
Yeah.
sleep also impact weight gain then?
Oh yeah, because it increases your cortisol levels, which makes you hungrier. There's a psychological component of food for comfort when you're feeling pretty ragged with stress and lack of sleep. It's probably one of the biggest problems. You certainly notice people in high stress jobs, especially, like you look at nurses that work overnight, they'll tell you, to have your diurnal rhythm disrupted like that, very frequently leads to weight gain. And I mean, some of it, Captain Obvious, if you're sleeping, you don't eat. But you'll notice that, and I certainly noticed during medical training that, where you're just seriously sleep deprived, where, you're not going, most nights you're not going more than a couple hours of uninterrupted sleep. You'll frequently go, and the foods you turn to at the time are usually things that, number one, taste good because you're going for this comfort element, but 2, it's like you're intentionally ingesting glucose, or simple sugars just to get that, short-term energy boost. What you're not considering when you do that is the crash afterward, of course. So to put it mildly, we got to get your sleep right. And by the way, there are genetics that go with this, and we have a company we're partnered with that is working on polygenic risk scores, and I'll get to explaining what those are in a minute. But looking at your risk of having things like obstructive sleep apnea or restless leg syndrome based on your genetics. So
what is
restless leg syndrome? So believe it or not, probably a majority of the people listening will know what this is because they'll know someone that's got it. it's, sometimes when people are trying to fall asleep at night, they can't keep their feet and legs still. They're just moving their legs around in their sleep. They're kicking and moving. And there's a neurologic basis for it. There's also a genetic basis for it. So that's something that's good to know about. I can tell you, so no, you don't have that?
What the only time where I feel restless is, let's say, if I really overworked in playing basketball or a workout
Yeah.
where it's just tired and I'm like twitching. But aside from
Yeah.
that,
So a couple of things I've learned from that from myself and patients is, you said you had a girlfriend. I heard the girlfriend in there. If you can get a massage, a 5-minute deep tissue massage of your calves and your hamstrings and whatnot, that can calm that down quite a bit. And take some magnesium and potassium. Make sure your electrolytes are up to speed, and that'll help a lot with that. It's amazing, actually. So, do you feel that it's probably mostly coming from your calves?
yeah, it's like,
Because
a lot
you're
of it is from
jumping,
the
right?
calves.
Your jump shots, jumping for rebounds, running up and down. So if you can get about a 5-minute deep, almost painful massage on each calf, you'll notice that that symptom goes away. I mean, it literally goes away. It's amazing. And then, like I say, taking some magnesium at night helps you sleep. It has a soothing effect on your brain, but it also helps with muscle cramping and the like. The same with potassium and foods that have potassium in them. Yeah. So tell me about the sleepwalking. Because I probably had 100 people fill out the questionnaire. You're the first one to say yes.
Okay. I wasn't sure how far to go back, but I sleepwalked as a kid. And
Mhm.
apparently the only time that I slept walk was during the time of my parents' divorce.
Right.
And I would just I would I don't know if I would say anything, but apparently I would just kind of like zombie around, and then they would just guide me to the bathroom, and then once I went to the bathroom, I was good, and then I just went back to sleep. But it only happened during the divorce though, and apparently it hasn't happened since.
Yeah. So I think sleepwalking, I'm not a sleep expert, but just my generalist doctor fund of knowledge, I think of it's like sleepwalking and sleep terrors together. So you you didn't were you having a lot of nightmares and stuff also, or not necessarily?
Yeah, there were some pretty vivid nightmares from what I remember.
Did you ever like wake up and break something or anything like that? Yeah, I think one of my brothers did that once upon a time.
It was in right. Well, okay. Actually, here's something that happened recently. I remember I was having this dream, and I don't know what happened, but I wanted to like punch something in this person because this person was like attacking me. And
Yeah,
so I wound up, and then mid punch, I woke up, and then I punched my girlfriend in the arm. And she was, I mean, luckily she's a heavy sleeper, but she was just like, ow. And so that is the extent of me, I guess, like being somewhat
yeah,
physical on that side, but never like breaking anything.
yeah. Okay. Yeah. So again, those are good targets. So there's a book out there called Why We Sleep by Matthew Walker. That
Okay.
is I don't know how much he gets into things like sleepwalking and sleep apnea, but I think he probably does. So you might think about that one. That was a bestseller for a while, meaning that it's readable for the average person, although it does get a little technical at times. So, all right, we'll move off that. We'll come back to that later. But
Okay.
but as we get into things, that's going to be kind of a focus for you. So
Interesting.
not smoker, no THC, a little bit of alcohol, no vaping.
Uh, I mean, I have done some cigars though, and like have occasionally done the marijuana, but it's
Do you
not like a
even like
frequent.
cigars?
I actually do. There was a month where I was like, wow, I want to do this. I want to do one cigar a week, and then it kind of just phased out.
Yeah, leave it phased out. It's not something you need. You may have set the record for vaccinations. This is pretty good.
Oh, nice.
All right, screening. So you actually have had one screening. So you had cholesterol screening. When did you have labs drawn at Kaiser? What was that?
A Kaiser.
I
Oh
think it was
man.
2019.
Yeah.
We'll just say January 1st. And the result was abnormal.
Was it
Yeah,
really?
yeah, your LDL was higher than the desired range.
Why did I not know about this?
You got to go to the right doctor.
This is why we're doing this. Thank you, Dr. Stanford.
And so this actually is a part of the process. I didn't go through this beforehand because very frequently, well, let me put it this way. Usually, especially with our quote unquote white glove version, I'll go through this questionnaire with the patient ahead of when we generate the report. But you being the special case you are, right? We waited for this. So you don't know if mom, dad, brothers, or sisters had any of these particular cancers? Your mom and dad still alive?
Yeah, my parents are still alive,
No
and
cancer?
yeah, no cancer from at least what we know. But I didn't know where to put some of the information about my great grandmother or my great great grandmother and their niece, and so I just figured to add it in that if unsure.
Yeah, no, it's perfect. And so actually, I'm guessing when your great great grandfather died, I mean, they really thought it was Alzheimer's. Well, I can tell you that you do not have the so-called Alzheimer's gene,
Oh,
but that doesn't mean I'm jumping the gun here, but so that's good. But my guess is that, back in the day, so to speak, and back in the day, a diagnosis of Alzheimer's, say, so it's like 30, 40, 50 years ago, that's a diagnosis that was made at autopsy. And I'm guessing they didn't do an autopsy to determine they had Alzheimer's. More likely they had, like especially the one at 90s, probably had age-related cognitive decline. This one at 65, though, yeah, you wonder about that one. Because most people don't have cognitive decline at 65 unless they have some type of dementia. So Alzheimer's, in families and in certain cultures, they call all dementia Alzheimer's, but of course, all dementia is not Alzheimer's. All right, so damn, your parents are younger than me. That is, you're old enough to be my grandchild, I guess, technically. So,
Grandpa Stanford, Grandpa Stanford.
so you're right. Auntie Anna, Auntie. So, so your mom's 56 and she doesn't have anything? Nothing? Takes no meds? No high blood pressure?
No, not that I know of. And I asked him. Yeah, no,
Said, no,
nothing.
we're fine. We take no medications.
Mm-mm.
Pretty cool. But your mom's mom, you say type 1 diabetes. When you say type 1 diabetes, do you just mean diabetes or you mean she's insulin dependent or what do you mean?
Oh, isn't insulin dependent. Did I mix up one and two? I thought two was worse.
Well, type 1 is the one that usually has onset in the teens or 20s, and it's an autoimmune thing that wipes out your pancreas and you're insulin dependent. Type 2 usually happens later in life, usually. And if it gets bad enough, you can require insulin. And it sounds like she was diagnosed at 59.
Yeah, yeah. So then it could be, I could have mixed it up and said it could be type 2 diabetes. She mentioned though was she's diabetic.
It
I
requires
guess,
insulin.
yeah, it does. Yeah.
And then your mom's dad, also diabetic, also
And
requires insulin. And do you know how old he was with that?
I don't, I'm unknown. Or yeah, I don't know when he was
Okay.
diabetic.
Okay. Well, you don't have any particular risk factors for type 1 diabetes, and obviously you're 29, but you have, and we'll talk about this, a lot of genetic risk for diabetes, but being the clean eater generally that you are, an exerciser, it's most likely never going to be a problem for you. But it is something that even especially at age 29, it's a good time. See what's, and we are looking at you from a a genetic standpoint. But we also need to look at your biochemistry. So what's your fasting glucose? What are your fasting insulin levels, hemoglobin A1Cs? Are we getting any telltale signs that you're at increased risk? And I need to be giving you advice. Well, the advice I can give you right now, just based on this history, and we'll get into your genetics, is you, like everyone else, needs to avoid foods with added sugar. Now, here on your dad's side, your dad's mom had a heart attack at 64 years old. So that's something that should be of concern both to your mom and yourself. I would wonder, and this gets into the podcast level type stuff. You have to remember that dying of a heart attack at 64, by the way, my mother died at 64 of a heart attack. That should get your attention because, atherosclerosis is what leads to heart attacks. We know how to prevent atherosclerosis, or if it's occurred, by and large, we know how to stop progression, delay the onset, slow the progression such that you should never die of a heart attack. Your grandfather, was he a smoker also, or just alcohol?
No, just alcohol.
I mean, heavy?
Yeah, heavy. Also, I do believe I misspoke though on the maternal side though. My grandparents aren't insulin. They don't require. They're not insulin dependent.
Tell me about this female untreated infection.
Yeah, apparently my aunt had some wound, and she was living in the Philippines too, so I haven't seen her since I was like super young. Like,
Was
she
the
died
wound on her
recently.
foot?
I think it was, honestly, I think it might have been on her foot. It
She
was
was
on her leg.
probably diabetic, and it was probably a diabetic wound infection. That's interesting. So maybe ask your pops if his sister was diabetic, and if it
Ooh.
was a diabetic wound infection,
Hmm.
because that's going to be no kids that you know of.
Oh, yeah, no kids. Sorry, I was still stuck on what you were saying with my aunts, and I was like, but okay.
Yeah, so
I
so
see
here's
kids, but
a
no
a
kids.
very common pathophysiology. Someone's insulin resistant, becomes diabetic. That causes changes in the very small blood vessels, usually affects the fingers and hands and toes and feet before it affects the rest of the body. And one of the things that it affects is the blood supply to the nerves. And so this, we call it peripheral vascular disease, is the lack of blood flow down into the lower extremities, especially the feet. That causes a peripheral neuropathy. So that means the nerves down in your feet don't work right. So the person will not sense that they're getting a wound, or they're not addressing it because it's not really bothering them because it's numb. And they wind up, it gets infected, and that infection starts to spread, and they'll require amputations and things like that. If they don't get amputated, sometimes they'll die of sepsis, which is overwhelming infection. All right, so I'm going to remember to click the update here, which is nice. But I understand they did a little fix on the app where this auto updates a little bit. The way our usual schema is that once I've gone over the reports with you, we release them to have patient to have access. So at a time, these are polygenic risk scores for a variety of chronic conditions and cancers and heart disease and atrial fibrillation and diabetes, all these things that you probably have some risk for from a genetic standpoint, but genetics is just part of it. There's also then the environmental aggravators that would make it more probable that you develop a certain chronic condition. So to break this down, we did whole genome sequencing for you. And that is, we looked at all the points of genetic variation that you have compared to another person. So to go back one step further, you inherited 3 billion letters in your genetic code. That's billion with a B from mom, spread over 23 chromosomes, and 3 billion letters spread over 23 chromosomes from dad. We're 99.9% the same. So I'll do the math for you. That means there's out of those 3 billion from each parent, 0.1% would be 3 million points of variation. So those 3 million points of variation that you uniquely have that makes you different from me and different from the guy next door, et cetera. We take that variant file and we're able to do some bioinformatics, machine learning, AI, weighted averages, fancy math, and project, given your particular variations, are you in that cluster of people that's more likely to get the disease or less likely? And if more likely, how much more likely? And this company, Allelica, has a platform that'll do that for these various conditions. I'm just going to step you through this and give you some examples. This is really incredible news for you. So the most common cause of cancer in a man is prostate cancer, and your risk is only 1/5 of the average risk. This is average and this is you. So that's a good thing to have. So it's good to be at below average risk for the common things. So if let's say you're at above average risk for brain cancer, well, that's not great, but your chance of getting brain cancer is only 1 in 200. And if you're at twice average risk, well, that's 2 in 100, meaning there's still 198 chances out of 200 you don't get it. But prostate cancer is different. Yeah, you can see that 1 in 8, 1 in 9 men get prostate cancer. Your risk is 1/5 of that. And so your lifetime risk is only 2%, based on this. Now, again, when you get older, we'll run a different test that generates what's called an integrated risk score, which does take into account things like family history and other subtle risk factors for prostate cancer and come up with an adjusted score. But this is very favorable for you. You're out here in you're 99 men out of 100 are more likely to get prostate cancer than you. So that's great news. Brain cancer, you're also less than average, but it's rare, like I said. Pancreatic cancer, it's also fairly rare, but seems to be increasing for whatever reason across the population. You're at a little bit below average there. And notice that when we were looking at your relatives, not a lot of cancer there, right? Except for the drinker. Did you know that alcohol is about the 4th leading risk factor for cancers in general?
Is it really?
Yeah.
That high?
Yeah.
Do you know the other 3? Just out of curiosity?
Smoking, number 1, obesity, number 2, diabetes, number 3.
And alcohol is number 4?
Yeah, that's how I have it in my mind. If someone has information otherwise that it's really the 6th or whatever, please feel free to email me.
It's just high. It's really high though. Okay, melanoma, low.
Melanoma, you're at well below average risk. You're in a 80% of people are more likely to get melanoma than you. Guess we're some fair-skinned Northern European like I am. We're out over here. We're getting it, buddy.
Okay.
And this is before they consider that, you said you had 1 to 2. How many moles did you have?
Not a lot.
So fewer than 10?
Yeah, fewer than 10.
Never use a tanning bed and you try to stay out of the sun, and there's no family history of it. So I'm not going to tell you not to pay any attention to it. But now another common cause of cancer though is colon cancer. So you're at a little bit of increased risk here, 72nd percentile. Your lifetime risk is 6% instead of 5%. So instead of having a 95 out of 100 chance of not getting colon cancer, your chance of not getting colon cancer is 94 out of 100. So in other words, you're at about average risk. Now, colon cancer Plus, I didn't see any colon cancer in your family. That's very reassuring. That's probably the number one risk factor for colon cancer. And there's some other things like obesity and some of the other things we mentioned that when we go to do the integrated risk score when you turn 40 in 11 short years, we can get an idea of your risk for that. Now, there is more colon cancer occurring in younger people. So if I were you, I'd be looking for any excuse to have a colonoscopy to get screened. So if I think right now they're saying age 45. When I started medical training, it was like 60 or 65. I think that pretty soon they're going to drop it down to 40 or 35. So I would be looking for, and I tell my patient, like if your doctor says, oh, maybe we should get a colonoscopy to see how come you're having, rectal bleeding. I noticed you had some hemorrhoids or whatever. Just say, yeah, I want the colonoscopy.
Okay.
You know what I mean?
Hmm.
And keep your eyes out and be in touch with your doctor about what the guidelines are for that. But just even having a slightly increased risk, even if you're average risk, even if you're slightly below average risk, because colon cancer, here's the stuff you really want to pay attention to is things that'll kill you that you can easily do something about. So that's why there's so much focus on metabolic stuff and heart disease. It can kill you and it's easy to fix. The statistics on colon cancer is they figure more than half of all people that die of colon cancer could have been saved had they done screening even per the recommended schedule. Even before we get into this risk assessment. So what's beautiful about this personalized precision medicine is we look at what your personal risk of colorectal cancer is, right? And if and how common is colorectal cancer, and should we do something to mitigate that risk? And so the do something at this point that I'm saying is certainly do those lifestyle things, don't smoke, watch your weight, don't drink too much, etc. But the other thing is avail yourself to the recommended screening. And really in a case like yours, if you're at average or even above average risk, the way things are going with colon cancer, I would add, I would try to jump at doing it early if you ever have the opportunity to. Make sense?
Yeah, makes sense.
Your heart disease risk is right at average, but if you were to then look at this polygenic risk score, this is just the genetic risk. If you were to become diabetic, if you were a smoker, if you were overweight, if a lot of different things that work against if your blood pressure is out of control, if you continue to have untreated sleep apnea, should you have sleep apnea, then this risk will go up. So once we integrate these other clinical factors with the genetic calculation, this can get more significant. So I think the way that your family history looks and the way all your genetics looks in general, making sure your metabolic profile is right, including your lipids, because I think your family has a genetic tendency toward this thing called metabolic syndrome. It just looks like it. A lot of diabetes, a lot of heart disease, strokes, and whatnot. So we need to make sure nothing like that happens to you. You're already well on your way, though, with your great lifestyle, but there's other things we can do, like getting your sleep right and reducing stress and all those things that are risk factors. And obstructive sleep apnea is a significant risk factor for developing coronary artery disease. And you have sleep apnea till proven otherwise based on your snoring. So there is an in-facility test for your sleep study in your future. So atrial fibrillation, you're right at average risk. This is something that doesn't tend to affect people until about 25, 30 years from now for you. So we'll talk to you about that later. Diabetes, you're at, markedly above average risk. And that's a problem for you because it's a very common disease and it's a risk factor for everything. So you have all these family members that have all the stigmata of heart disease, not much genetic loading for high blood pressure. Your blood pressure, in fact, looks good. Are some of the people in your family overweight?
Some.
Some risk factor, or actually, it looks like your genetic risk for having high triglycerides, not so bad. Your genetic risk to have low, good cholesterol, not so bad. So you're good there. Your LDL also not so bad in terms of your genetic risk. But we got this little baby here. Did you read the ticker section of Peter Attia? First thing he looks for is this.
Yeah,
And you have that gene in your family. So you're one of the, those genes, these 39 different gene variants that together predict your risk of having elevated lipoprotein A. You definitely have that risk. They did not, of course, they did not check that at Kaiser for you, but I'll order that for you. Your Alzheimer's risk is average. You don't have the gene. You have some increased risk for inflammatory bowel disease. That's like your Crohn's and ulcerative colitis. But again, this is instead of having a 1 chance in 70, your chance is more like not 1 in 70, but 1 in 60. Your chance is like 1 in 40. So it's about average risk. We call that average risk, but it's just something to keep in mind. And all this discussion about trying to avoid inflammation in your body and oxidative stress and the like, this just gives you that much more incentive to keep things quiet. Your stroke risk, interestingly enough, is very low. Only second percentile, less than average. That's interesting. Your psoriasis risk is low, 23rd percentile. Celiac, which is another autoimmune, you kind of somewhat increase. You ever get the idea you might be gluten intolerant or anything? Anyone in your family say they're gluten intolerant?
No. Wait, is that? No, not at all.
So I'm not saying, so celiac disease and gluten, I mean, definitely people that are celiac disease have big problems with gluten. What we found, I say we, the research community, that people that tend to be at increased genetic risk for celiac are often those people that identify themselves as gluten intolerant. Sometimes just for grins, you might want to try a gluten-free diet and see if it makes you feel any better. Do it for like a month. You're going to be that guy in the pizza parlor that says you want the pizza that's gluten-free.
Well, and we're going to be going over, because I did want to talk about lipoprotein A.
We haven't even gotten to your report yet.
Oh my gosh, there's so much.
So what I'm trying to show you here is how we generate the report. So this is this is educational and didactic.
I love it. Okay.
And the last section here, sure enough, it says you're from this part of the world. Sure enough, you're from that part of the world, right?
Yeah.
All right, now this is what you're really wanting me to show you. And this is the so-called, what we call our Get DNAbled report. We started going over it, and we went over a lot of it in the intake form. Normally when I go over this, I don't go over the intake form. I just wanted to show potential users of the platform what to expect.
Yeah, and do they also? You also go through the Allelica report with them too, right? Or is that only for the web?
I really don't.
Web service.
I did one of these yesterday. I don't think I went over. I did go over the integrated risk report though. So let's just kind of whip on through here. So, some type 2 diabetes, we're certainly seeing some genetic risk for that. A heart valve issue at 75, not sure what that's all about. Cataracts, it's too much sun exposure on the lenses, asthma, sleep apnea, and your mom's brother. Is he overweight?
Yes. Sorry if you're listening to this, Uncle.
Well, I mean, you know, you don't have to be overweight to have sleep apnea, for sure. So, I mean, it's, and as I said, you have sleep apnea until proven otherwise. Based on this statement, I apparently snore quite a bit. I'm gonna just clarify this for you. That's AMD tendonitis. So this document is meant to be looked at, and for the most part, by other physicians, and not, this isn't necessarily a report for you. Of course, when we get down to the recommendations are plain language stuff that you'll understand, but your primary care doctor, whoever is going to execute on all this, will understand. So let's take you through the summary statement. So like any good 29-year-old, you have very few labs for me. No lipoprotein A. Your LDL is 122. They're going to call that normal, but it's higher than desired. So desired would be 100 or less. Now, one of the things that confounds this for you is I noticed on the lab report it said you weren't fasting. So we need fasting cholesterol levels on you, and that's going to be one of the recommendations. We need all these labs on you, and you're not too young to get these labs. Now, I've summarized the Allelica findings on here by system. And like I say, if you were older, we would also have the gene type integrated risk scores on here, and it gets a little more interesting, but that's okay. I have enough good things that I'm able to pull off here that's going to change how you live and the quality of your life for decades to come. First thing we got to get a handle on is this cholesterol situation. So is this higher than desired cholesterol, this lipoprotein little a, is this real? We need a lipid panel that is, an advanced lipid panel that gives us information on lipoprotein little a and ApoB. I believe it or not, if your ApoB is up around 130, 140, and your lipoprotein little a is way up there, I'm going to recommend a statin therapy for you, even right now. I probably would. Yeah. Yep. And keep doing those great things you're doing in terms of diet, exercise, alcohol avoidance. Of course, you don't smoke. It's all good. Then we get down here into the endocrine section, and you have this 31% lifetime risk for type 2 diabetes, just based on your genes. Because of your excellent habits and whatnot, when we go to do the integrated risk score, that's going to be significantly lower. But we don't want anything going like that. So one of the things that might be a good idea for you is, and many biohacker self-quantifiers do this, and that's put a continuous glucose monitor on you and just see what your blood sugars are doing for a couple of weeks, just out of curiosity, just at 29 years old. I'm sure you're not pre-diabetic or anything like that, but let's just get a handle. Let's just try to see where you're at. And we need a fasting glucose. We need to know what your insulin levels are fasting, your hemoglobin A1C. All these things we would look at to see how you're doing in terms of your insulin glucose metabolism and your risk for developing diabetes or tendency toward that. We don't have any of that information, and we need it.
Would you recommend getting that first then before going through the process of biography health, or is it just kind of like?
No, just, the first thing you want to do is do this process, and I'll just work with whatever you have. And part of my recommendations, I'll tell you where there's more information that's needed. Now, you have to remember, once you're on the platform, one of the cool things is we have all your information, and we can update your information on the platform as new information comes in. And periodically, usually every 6 months, we can run one of these reports pretty effortlessly, because at this point, most of this stuff is automatically populated, and we can update the recommendations based on what we see. So there's no need to wait. Don't wait.
Don't wait.
Let us start let us start seeing where you are, where your risks are. And part of what our recommendation is, our recommendations include is where is there missing information. So that's like saying, should everyone have a sleep study before they come see me? And the answer is no. I mean, I can help you decide if a sleep study is likely to be helpful for you.
It's almost like a status check where it's like, this is just real time, all of the information that we have, and then we
No,
can.
and this makes a bigger point. You're such a good interviewer. So the bigger point is that personalized precision medicine is a healthcare strategy. It's not some little twist on healthcare delivery. The current healthcare system is reactive, and nothing happens till something breaks. It is symptom driven, and someone's at risk for diabetes, and then they put them on a medication and try to get their A1C down. Not a lot of looking at underlying causes of disease, nor the threads that tie. Personalized precision medicine is let's understand the individual, what they as an individual, they're in of one, that one person, what are their risks for these different chronic conditions? What is the biochemistry, those labs? What's that telling us? What other information is out there that we can use to assess where your risk is, how high is your risk, and what would be the most precise things that we could target toward you in terms of efficacy and ease of implementation to reduce those risks to average or below so these chronic conditions don't happen to you, so that your health span, your functional capacity is very high up to the end of your life. That's the name of this game. Got it?
Got it.
And so we talked before about single gene risk and polygenic risk. So in addition to these polygenic risks, you do have a gene. And I've been seeing this a lot, I guess, because I've done more than one or two Filipino patients for the apolipoprotein A2. You have two of the less desirable copies, and that no doubt is what's driving the lipoprotein little a and the LDL risk, et cetera. So you have inherited. So to answer the question here, so especially with young people, they go, why am I doing this? So because I'm a healthy person, and you are, and you're amazing. Of course, we spent a lot of time together. And I go, man, that guy is fit, and so we know that. But the question we're asking is not, are you fit? The question we're asking is, have you inherited genetically? Do you have inherited risk for the same things that have happened, like to that grandparent that had a heart attack at 64, or the uncle that had an aneurysm? And by the way, aneurysms, as there's a genetic risk to that. So I don't know if the strict criteria for you to be screened for, if you meet strict criteria for being screened for aneurysms, but if it's me, and I have a second degree relative that had an aneurysm, that's just one more reason. If you ever want to do one of those whole body MRI scans you hear about, people are getting these whole body MRIs. One more reason probably for a guy like you to do it. Probably Q Bio, up by you, that lab that does whole body MRIs and comprehensive stuff. But we'll talk about that later. And really, your risk overall of cancer seems relatively low, and that is borne out in your family. You don't see a lot of cancer in your family. The exception is colon cancer. And if you were to be at increased risk for any one of those, that's the one I'd want to be at increased risk for. Why? Because there's excellent screening. So there's no reason to ever die from colon cancer if they catch these, if you get screened often enough and on the right schedule. And I would say, I would be trying to get it done by the time I was 35 if I were you. And you might start on a every 5-year kind of cycle, work it out with your GI doctor. And we're going to have more information about your colon cancer risk as years go on here, because the body of knowledge around all this just gets so much better. So the key is So and to finish out that story, where you're at higher risk, do the things to mitigate risk, and then use precision diagnostics like colonoscopy, like high resolution MRIs, like clearly scans for, coronary CT angiogram for heart disease, to identify the onset. Because when cancers, especially cancers, but even heart disease, especially diabetes, all these, the earlier you can detect it, the better your chances are for reversing, curing. If you catch a lung cancer at stage 1, they go in there and do a thoracoscopy, yeah, just with the same kind of tools they do to laparoscopy, where they use the Chinese chopsticks. They don't even have to fillet you open. They just go in there, punch holes, take the thing out, and cure your lung cancer. So we're living in that kind of a world. And even if it's not a different kind of cancer, there's precision therapeutics that target just the type and the molecular derangement that's causing your cancer. They target that, and it's a much better cure. And by the way, when a cancer hasn't been growing in your body for a long time and having all those chances to mutate and come up with all these different little tricks that cancer comes up with to make it hard to treat, if you catch it before all that happens, it's much easier to cure the person. We talked about your Alzheimer's and stroke risk not being particularly high. I wonder about that, because it's hard to reconcile that a little bit with your risk for diabetes. I guess what they're saying is independent of the risk for diabetes. But like I say, if you take this polygenic risk score and then you add in other clinical factors, like if you have a higher risk of diabetes, if you're a diabetic, your risk for stroke would be certainly higher than second percentile. Does that make sense?
Yeah. So that score was only independent outside of, only speaking to the genetic predisposition and not, let's say, taking into the account if I did have diabetes or not then.
Yeah. So the key for you, the theme so far for you is we got to make sure you never get diabetes, and you're doing your part so far. We just but it would be our due diligence to take a closer look. Also, your vitamin, you have this kind of unusual gene. I haven't seen this gene before, that can be associated with high plasma vitamin B12 levels. Nothing wrong with that. So it's really not pathogenic. It's just unusual. And you have some risk of some in Asian certain dermatologic conditions, but I've seen your skin is clear as the driven snow.
Thank you to my girlfriend.
Yeah. And we talked about the inflammatory bowel disease risk, celiac, genetic tendency to be overweight, but instead you've converted that ability to put on mass and you're just very muscular. I mean, I'm sure you're 20% or less body fat. And with the celiac, like I say, you might want to, just for fun, try a month with gluten-free, see if it changes anything, any problems. When you go to have kids, we've included your carrier status. You do have one gene. Most of us have 3 or 4, so you're lucky there. So when we do the future mother of your child, we'll just make sure she doesn't have that same gene.
What does that mean? I'm just a little lost there.
Well, that there's inherited conditions that, so for example, cystic fibrosis.
Right.
You can be a cystic fibrosis carrier. I don't think I am. It seems like someone in my family is a cystic fibrosis carrier. You're fine unless you marry another cystic fibrosis carrier and you both give the kid the cystic fibrosis gene. The odds of that, if both people are carriers, that means 1 in 4 of your kids are going to get a copy of the gene from both of you and then become, have the disease cystic fibrosis. So that's called autosomal inheritance. And in the case of the one you have, it's not cystic fibrosis, but something that can result in deafness.
Whoa. Huh. That's kind of interesting.
How like you've seen, I think it's the Missouri School for the Deaf, where they have that incredible football team. I think I
Never heard
think
of it.
that many of those kids will have had some inherited condition that they inherited from both your families. We do this other thing called pharmacogenomic analysis. So we look at those enzymes that metabolize drugs in your body. Like, let's say, name a drug. Let's say we're going to start you on Zoloft for your anxiety. So let's say that Zoloft is metabolized by this particular enzyme. I'm making this up. Of course, it's not. But this particular enzyme does not work that well on you. So your doctor would have this information that you have reduced function of the gene that metabolizes Zoloft. So you might start at a lower dose because if you're not metabolizing the drug, you can tend to accumulate it. This idea of looking at the genetics of the genes that metabolize drugs can do a lot toward avoiding unwanted side effects, drug-drug interactions, and toxic reactions. I don't have any recommendations for you along those lines because you don't take any. So now the summary statement, and most of this is kind of a summary of the recommendations. You need a full set of labs, including a fasting lipid panel with lipoprotein little a and apolipoprotein B, these diabetes associated things. I also suggest a continuous glucose monitor, and it would be fun to look at. I think you should prepare yourself early in life to start avoiding foods with added sugar, foods that are ultra processed. Even those ultra processed bars, it's hard to stay away from them. But the other thing you want to stay, not nearly as important as the added sugar, but a lot of these foods that are ultra processed will, even if they're not health bars, especially if they're not health bars, but they're gonna have like fructose, corn syrup, all these things are terrible for diabetics. But you don't want the ones really that have artificial sweeteners in them either. So I would also avoid artificial sweeteners and those really starchy carbohydrates. But when we get to continuous glucose monitor on you, we're going to really know what's going on. After we get that advanced lipid panel on you, if your cholesterol is higher than desired, if that LDL is still up around 100, the ApoB is high in the lipoprotein little a, yeah, I would start a low dose statin like now. I would drive those numbers down now because your family shows and your genetics show that you have the potential to get some, this atherosclerosis, clogging of the arteries. And your generation, we decide you're a young millennial, we're looking for you to live to 100, and we want to be completely functional as you go through those last couple of decades of your life, and you're going to want clean pipes to do that.
I have a stupid question.
I love those.
Okay. What's a low dose statin? Or like what does it mean just doing a statin?
So let's say, the statin du jour is something called Crestor. And so like my dose of it, because I like to keep my lipids as low as possible, is 40. Actually, it has been as high as 40. I have it at 20 now, and I combine it with another drug called Zetia, Cetia, which is another class of drugs that potentiates this, if you will, it potentiates the statin. And so you can take a lower dose of statin, mix it with the Zetia. I don't have any side effects from the statin or anything like that I know of. And I tolerate it well. And I like having very low cholesterol. And I like when I go for the coronary CT angio and the guy takes one look at me with a body mass index of whatever it is, he kind of thinks I'm probably going to have really bad coronary arteries. And he looks at my coronary arteries, it's like there's nothing there. There's just no disease. And they go, "That's amazing. How'd you do this?" I go, "Well, I was in medical school at UCLA when they were doing all the research on atherosclerosis and how bad ILDLs. I said, well, I'm getting out of statin. So I got out of statin 35 years ago. And I have clean pipes. What can I say? The rest of it may not be so good, but my pipes are clear, which is important because as we talked about on another podcast, I am an 4 or ApoE epsilon 4 carrier, which is the so-called Alzheimer's disease. And I need to be doing every single thing to keep my risk of dementia, to address that. And in addition to getting enough sleep and exercising every day and getting the blood sugars right, it's also really important to have a good blood supply to your brain. And I'm so glad that I started a statin 35 years ago. I'm sure it helps me to this day. Blood pressure is a huge risk factor for heart disease. I recommend everyone monitor their blood pressure with a home blood pressure measuring device. Just know where you're at. You want to be down around 120 over 70. Certainly if you're consistently more than 130 over 80, you got to talk to your doctor about it. For you, it's an absolute no-brainer with this, I'm told I snore a lot thing, and the sleepwalking, and I don't know, you may have sleep terrors, I'm not sure. They kind of, when they do they also look at your brain waves when you sleep. So these sleep studies are pretty high science and are definitely worth doing. Now, I know that you use a wearable technology and do sleep monitoring. I didn't look at it because I knew I'm referring you to a sleep doctor to order a sleep study, and you can discuss what you're seeing on that with him. Again, low threshold to do some kind of screening for aneurysms, given that you had a grandparent with an aneurysm. And I'm starting to get the idea that aneurysms run in the Filipino population. I'm going to have to look that up, but you're about the third Filipino I've had that told me they have a relative with an aneurysm. And otherwise, it's not that common that I hear about it. So there's just anecdotally, that seems like a lot of aneurysms to me. And then why don't you get all these lab studies and get some of this work done and come back and talk to me, and we'll rerun this analysis.
Yeah. I mean, yeah, this is a lot to work on, and a lot more. Well, it was relieving in knowing certain cases, but then also I liked that there was actionable steps outside of it too. And I appreciate you sharing your experience with statin as well. I mean, shoot, I had no idea on that side of it.
The way this works is everybody has increased risk for something. On a scale of things, you're really fairly pristine. You don't have the ApoE epsilon 4 that people worry about. You don't have a sky high risk of heart disease, at least genetically. I think some of these other things though may modify that. You're really in good shape. Everything we talked about. So that the things that are easiest to deal with would be that insulin glucose metabolism. We identified your risk. You haven't suffered any consequences from it so far. You probably wouldn't for a long time because you're such a healthy person. But if you want to be that guy that hones yourself and prepares yourself to live to 100 or 110 and be highly functioning for the vast majority of it, you're going to want to make sure that fasting insulin, you don't become insulin resistant, you don't have your glucose spiking and dropping and all those kinds of things. And, and those are things that are the most easily dealt with. Cancer risk is a little more scary and hard to deal with, and risk of neurodegenerative disease is a little scarier and hard to deal with. But you've got everything that you're at risk for. It's not only actionable, I can tell you right now, knowing you and that you're plugged into this personalized precision medicine, these will never be a problem for you. And even like the aneurysm screening, I'm saying, yeah, get screened, because your chance is maybe 5 out of 100 instead of 1 out of 100. I don't know, it's probably not that high, but still 95% that you don't have it. But if they see an aneurysm, they can watch it. And if they feel like they need to repair it, they're mostly repaired endovascularly. It's not like they even cut your head open anymore to do it. They, snake through an artery to go up in there and stent those things. I know some vascular surgeons. It's amazing. I hope they still keep you overnight when they do one of those, but I don't even know that they keep you overnight in the hospital for an aneurysm repair anymore. So if I were you, I would feel really, really good about this. And I think you've gotten some great advice, based on putting this whole picture together, the need to get your sleep under control. We talked about caffeine. We talked about making sure you don't have sleep apnea and getting a sleep study, see if anything else is going on, and getting your lipids right. I mean, the easiest thing in the world is to get your lipids corrected. And unfortunately, just to reemphasize, you're not going to be able to do that, get down to 50 from 122 with diet and exercise alone. So if these numbers hold up on those repeat fasting labs, we're going to have to do something about it.
Got it. Wow. Thank you so much, Dr. Stanford, for going through this entire process, and just even educating me on all of the back end details of seeing all this different data. I mean, it's extremely impressive to be able to look at these different variants and then end up creating my own personalized approach to this. So I just want to say thank you again for taking.
And thank you for, this was the real deal. I mean, this is exactly what the encounter looks like. And it was very generous of you to open up your medical record, as paltry as it is, for everyone so they could get an idea how this process works.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Dr. Stanford. And honestly, we'll probably have another episode where I get my labs done again.
Yeah, get your labs and get that sleep study, and then
then we'll talk again.
And let's slap that CGM on you and circle back. Continuous glucose monitor.
Let's do it.
All right, we'll see you next time, buddy.
See you next time. Thanks, Dr. Stanford.
Bye.
Thanks for joining us on the Precision Medicine Made Simple podcast. If this episode inspired you to learn more about your health, please leave us a review and share the podcast with a friend. Your feedback helps spread the word about the power of precision medicine. Remember, taking action today can lead to a healthier tomorrow. See you next time.